Good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me okay? Okay. First of all, I'd like to thank the NMLRA for putting this event on. I think this is a fantastic location, even though the weather's not cooperating with us real well, but we're all used to that. My name is Jack Mitch, known as Poncho on Ashley's Return. Gerry Lucky Messmer and Scott Amish Staggs were three of several people that went on this trip, and we're the three that did the entire trip. So I really didn't know there was a connection much with Ashley and Hawkins till after we were invited, and I heard a few things and got to look at go on cycle through here. We're a little low tech on this with what we got to do here. That's Samuel Hawkins there. And he and his brother came from Virginia to start the gun shop in St. Louis. And the two men that were partners in the fur company were William Ashley and Andrew Henry. And these guys together, there's Ashley and Henry next to there. This is a famous ad they put in the St. Louis paper. They were looking to hire 100 men to work 1 to 3 years up the Missouri trapping furs for them. And so I believe it was Andrew, well, we'll start here, I guess. We went to a week-long camp up in Idaho in the mountains. And there we watched many men ride in to Rendezvous. And some as long as a week, maybe 2 weeks, they had ridden to come into camp. And I believe that's a video there. And so we had never done a trip like this, and I thought, I've never seen anybody ride out of Rendezvous. Everybody would go down, pack up, and leave. And I was studying Ashley at that time as a kind of requirement for doing a report of his return trip. Back on his first rendezvous. And I thought it was interesting, so I thought, man, I'd really like to do this. So this is where I met Lucky. And I said, hey, let's do this trip. It's a couple thousand miles. And he was getting ready to retire from the Army, and he said, let's do it. So I thought, shit, I'm hooked now, I gotta go. So it wasn't long after that, I was at home, and Amish here had become part of the organization. We all share an interest in studying the fur trade. And I run by him shooting pool one night, and he goes, yeah, I'll go. He owned his own company. He said, I could be absent for 3 months, no big deal. And this slide here is a big reason why I was able to do this trip. This is my wife, Kim. She's called Stands and Fire. As you can see, she's collected a little firewood, and we were at this camp for a week. She kept the fire going continuously for a full week. So these are some guys here that ridden in to the rendezvous. They'd spent a couple of weeks, many of them good friends of ours. So we decided, okay, we're going to do this. So you don't just plan a 2,000-mile, 3-month journey, go home and grab some gear and go. This took 2.5 years, I believe, of preparation to do this trip, because we're traveling through modern times. This is not the 1825 era, and there was many things to do besides testing equipment, building equipment, studying, getting history, which was a big part of what we did. So go on through there. So go ahead. Get on there. Okay, right here, I'm going to stop for a second, and we'll talk about Ashley then. So they hired these guys to go up trapping and establish a fort called Fort Henry up at the confluence of the Yellowstone in Missouri, and they needed to supply them after they'd been up there. So Henry's going to go up with a keel boat with supplies in it. And he got no more than maybe 300 miles, and it hit a snag and sunk. So Ashley had to quickly get credit, get another boat, and go up to supply these men. So he went up, and with this boat. So when he returned, he made it up, and he come back, and when he come back, then that's when he met the Hawkens. And he told them, he says, hey, I'm tired of these Indians shooting at me from these high banks and I can't reach them with my rifle. I need a super Hawkins. So I guess that's how that was built. A longer rifle, 69 caliber, 1 ounce ball that he could knock them Indians off of those high banks and cliffs that they were shooting down on him from. So I believe that was also the first Hawkins that was built. It was marked serial number 1. So I had not had that connection when we were doing this trip. So 1825, these men hadn't been supplied for a long time. They were surviving on their own, trading with the Indians. And Ashley needed to go out, supply these men, and of course gather all the furs that they had trapped and collected for him. So I think he left in either November or December of 24 and took that much time to get all the way out west here. This is the Green River coming down to the reservoir, all the way over here just north of Utah to a place today called Lone Tree. It's up the Henry's Fork that feeds the Green. And here he held, pardon me, a 1-day rendezvous. Now later on they were 2 weeks long, but he held a 1-day rendezvous, resupplied his men, gathered all the furs, and took 60 men and borrowed horses. And he proceeded here in southwest Wyoming, went up across South Pass, and he went up north all the way just into present-day Montana to Fort Smith. And here on Grapevine Creek, he harvested about 24 buffalo, skinned them, built buffalo hide boats, and he and about 12 men floated in those boats and all those hides up the Bighorn River, up to the Yellowstone, and then on up to the Missouri River. Now the rest of the men, they returned with the borrowed horses back where they come from. They get the horses back. So when Ashley made it to the Missouri River, here he met a flotilla of military boats. Atkinson and O'Fallon, who had been commissioned by the government to make treaties with the Indians going up the Missouri because they were constantly harassing and impeding supplies getting up the Missouri. So Ashley and his men, well actually his men spent about a week here resting at the fort, and Ashley went with Atkinson and O'Fallon on up the river a ways looking for Blackfeet because he had not run into any and had not had a chance to make a treaty with them yet. So they didn't find them. They came back and they had ditched all the buffalo hide boats and thrown the furs on, mostly on one keelboat called the Muskrat. So they then floated down the Missouri all the way back to St. Louis. I don't know if Ashley lost or never did keep a diary of his return trip from the time he left. I've looked, never found one. And so it was interesting to see what Ashley may have run into, especially, since we're in modern time, what he may have run into on his return trip. So at this point, we decided to do this trip and start working out logistics, making equipment. And so I'll go through these quick. So we had to tan hides, you can go through here several times, tan smoke hides, make clothes. And then we started doing camps to test our equipment, get some experience. I think this was the Clarion River in Pennsylvania. Go ahead and go on through that. And we were trying different equipment, and we really got appreciation for how hard it was to travel, try to make good time and eat too. So I believe this trip, we'll stop right there. We all split one squirrel one night without shot being fired. There's a little cliff along the river, and Amish snuck up on a squirrel and smashed it with his paddle in the boat. That's what we had for dinner one night. So he was tender. Okay, so then Lucky and I made a trip out west to Idaho, to two guys that we eventually talked into leading the ride. I'm not a horseman. Most of the time I spend 2 hours taking my kids on the ride out west, trail ride. So we're out there learning how to pack. We took saddles, they helped us modify our saddles. We learned how to pack, tie, weigh, a lot of things we were going to need to do. And I believe that it was here we talked them into leading the ride. This husband and son team is Conan and Han Asmussen.
So, let me jump in real quick. I don't even like one of the things when he's talking about making all the gear, it's important to know that every single thing that we took was handmade, hand sewn, period correct, 1825. Everything. Hand sewn saddles, pack saddles, clothes, everything. So that's why it took 2.5 years to get ready. Because you have to make all that, and then when you test it, it ruins it. So everything was true to 1825.
Okay. You go on probably through some of these. This is some stuff. Holsters are like canteens. We had to protect them so they were covered. And here, I decided I was going to ride a mule on this trip. Much against Asmussen's recommendations, they said, you need a horse. And I was just probably as hard-headed as a mule. I said, no, I already bought this mule. I'm going to ride this mule. I got a saddle made for it, and I'm riding this mule, which, okay, they were right, but I wouldn't admit to it then.
And she can jump.
Oh yeah, she's an Olympic jumper. We'll talk about that later. And this is one of our people that have helped us on this trip. We call them angels. This is my neighbor. This is where Harley, my mule, was kept. And my neighbor's teeth looked a little bit better than the mule. You know, that this is a saddle that I made for her, the wood fork, and then the leather was put over, and I'm not sure where our guy is, brother that made this particular set, Mitch Alexander. This is a modern saddle that I was doing some training on, so I'm going through. Here's another camp we did, Amish and I. We got a lot of our neighbors to allow us to cross their land, and we got about a 25-mile ride that we could build up our rear ends to ride, and we got 4 inches of snow on this day at this small game camp. Same time, Gerry's out in upstate New York riding and building up to 25, 30 miles a day of riding. This was another winter camp, another year, testing gear, trying stuff, and really trying to skinny our gear down. You know, when we come to do these camps, we might take a few extra luxury items. That's a 3-day canoe trip I did alone on the Eel, trying out some gear, getting ready for it. Another winter camp, deer camp. And then we get to Colorado for a week-long rendezvous. It's not Colorado, it's just over into Wyoming. And we take the stock out, we're riding from camp, trying things out. I think I'm making fishing line there. And there's Lucky and Bubbles, mule, auction at the AMM event. There's stands and fire cooking for all of us. And this is Bill's wife standing in the creek there. So, I'll stop here for a second. We were planning on doing exactly what Ashley did. And we still don't know if Ashley accidentally run into Atkinson and Fallon on the Missouri, but they did know each other, so we think maybe that was kind of planned. And so we were going to take our boat, we call it Piro, you'll see it here in a little bit, and Buffalo hide boats, and take them not just to the Missouri, but we had no choice but to take them all the way down the Missouri to St. Louis. And so we're here at this thing, 2018. We actually took off on this trip in July of 2019, so we're a little bit, about 12 months away here. And we're out here with Bill Bailey, who is the bushway for this camp, going through here to get to Bill. So there's Bill, one more, and we'll stop there. So Bill Bailey, he's a mule man, and he'd kind of tell me, hey Jack, it's okay to ride a mule on that trip, it'd be just fine. But Bill's a master woodworker, for those of you who don't know him. And we were sitting around talking about the trip, and going, man, wouldn't it be cool if we could get to the Missouri and meet a keel boat like Ashley did, and then do the Missouri on the keel boat all the way down. And Bill kind of sits there for a little bit, and then he goes, I'll build that keelboat. We're like, what? And he goes, yeah, it's been on my bucket list for years. And we're like, who has built a keelboat on their bucket list? I go, have you ever built a boat? No. I'm thinking, okay.
Is it going to float?
Is it going to float, exactly. Am I going to put my gear on that boat? So, there, you know, that's how the keelboat came about. So, there's a picture of one. And keelboats, you know, they're powered in many different ways. You know, before steam, they were, the Missouri, of course, was different then. For those who don't know, it's a mile wide, 3 foot deep, and they could paddle up it. They could pull it by rope with men. And they could use, I think at that time, maybe the military might have had paddle wheel powered by men. So, part of this getting ready, I went out to the area and drove around the route, and I looked at all the man-made obstacles to try to get a handle on really what we were going to see along the way. That's the Bighorn before, okay? So, during the stop here, for that logistics trip, you know, we don't have men to take our horses back, you know, on foot, so what I had to do is plan horses and trailers where we ended the ride and people to take our stock and drive them home so we could continue on the river without stopping.
Those are buffalo hides, man.
Yeah, so those are 2 big bull hides. You can go hoot there. So Amish and I traveled to Kansas to a man named Kevin Hebert. Kevin made this basket here too. I traded frog skins for. So we, this was a 2-hide boat. We learned how to tie it, sew it together. We learned how to build frame using strips of deer hide to tie the pieces of wood together, a lot of it being willow, because it could bend without breaking a lot of it. And here Kevin's mounting on the front of this boat, which is his, a flintlock cannon, like they have on some of the keelboats. Lewis and Clark had one. Never did fire it once, but I thought it was pretty cool what he was doing here. So it's going through here a little bit. So the frame's done, the hides have been soaking in the river for, I don't know, a week, 2 weeks, and it actually took a tractor to pull both of them out. So he brought them up here, and they're laid over the frame and just lapped over. And you can tie the ends inside if you want to, but once it dries, it's just a hard shell. It's not a tan leather, it's rawhide. So we're back to Indiana here, and Amish and I are doing rides, you know, just trying to build up our stamina and our animal stamina. And I'm following him across this little ditch one day, and all of a sudden, Amish and his horse almost disappeared. So it was all I could do to keep Harley from following right into the same quagmire. And I don't know, it was about 20 minutes of what the heck are we going to do, you know? And little did we know this was going to help get us prepared for some things we might encounter on the trip. So this is a Puro. It's a handmade wooden boat that we would use on the trip. We would have liked to use just buffalo hide boat like Ashley did, but we weren't able to shoot more buffalo along the way because, you know, the hides could rot, lose hides, tear hides. So we used period correct Puros, and actually that boat was delivered to me from a guy that builds them in Louisiana. He built it and drove it up 4 days before we left. And of course down there it's really humid. When he got here a couple days it was split. This is Casby Messmer, Lucky's wife, and she's another great gal that, you know, said, okay honey, you can leave for 3 months and go on a trip.
My family asked her, are you going to let him go? And she just replied with, how do I stop him?
So you can go through here. I think there's some other pictures. There's one of the cracks up in the bow of the boat. So it took a little bit of sealing, and what they used back then to seal boats was like elk tallow and ash mixed together. These are medicine bags the wives made that we put on and never took off the entire trip. These are some medallions. A brother of ours hand-stamped 50 of them, which we carried to trade with our angels and people along the way, much like Ashley and his men did with the Indians. This thing was a very fragile boat, so the only room we had was on top of the horse trailer going out. So Amish and I built this box that this could fit just right on, tied down well enough that it'd stay, but we wouldn't flex it because It was a fragile boat. So on the way up, Gerry's come. I couldn't find those slides, but Gerry arrived with Tom, another angel, who rode all the way out from New York just to drive a truck back to the staging area and fly home. So on the way up, we went to northern Indiana to a buffalo farm, bought buffalo hides to make buffalo hide boats, and stopped in wherever Pete's from to drop 2 off so they could be making a boat when they joined us later. And of course, you know, you have a little excitement going out. We got that taken care of, and here we are arrived in Lone Tree, Wyoming, where the rendezvous was actually held. You can see a bench top behind this sign where it was held. And you won't be able to read this, but you can probably Google it and see it. But we're hoping that we can have a 200th anniversary rendezvous there in 2025. Here's the only building in Lone Tree, Wyoming, an old mercantile store that was closed. So we're like, okay, we need to camp, and we're waiting on Asmussen's to get there. And so we got a couple of days, and we're going to stage and get ready for this ride. And we're looking for a place to camp. We talked to a lady by the mercantile store, and all of a sudden this old beat-up Jeep comes pulling up there, and this guy jumps out. Joe Hickey is his name, 2nd or 3rd generation rancher. He goes, understand you boys are looking for a place to camp. Come on, follow me. So he took us to a piece of land that I believe he was leasing, had a corral, a little creek running through it. It was an ideal setup where we could stage to take off on this ride. So there's Tom Reese between Lucky and I, great guy that rode all the way out to help us out. That's Han Asmussen, father of Conan. These 2 guys, let's stop right here, these 2 guys, Conan's on the right, they rode from Canada to Mexico and when Conan was 12 years old. And there's some great stories. I wish we had more time. Let's go on through here. These photos up here, actually, the one before this one was done by a professional photographer, seen us on the trip, begged us to come to her place, which is just close by so she could take a bunch of pictures. Here's the 6th wheel on our ride. Dixon Varner. He was the head vet at Texas A&M for the veterinary school, a world-known geneticist for stallion reproduction. So we had a vet on the trip. It was a great thing to have. There's Conan. When they arrived here, they had just got done with the 2-week ride, riding into camp for a week long up in the Rockies somewhere. So they had horses to shoe, so we had to spend a couple of days while they got that ready. We had all sewn up, 20 bags each, so we could start packing stuff. We could start putting things together, dried goods, some of the food that we took. And that picture before, Joe Hickey, we were passing time, took us up here and showed us the remnants of an old medicine wheel that was up on a plateau. You could see off the edge of that forever. It was pretty neat going through there. Lucky, so packing. The panniers had to be packed and equally balanced. And so we used actually hand-forged springs to weigh these every day when we load up. So we're spreading all our gear out one day, getting ready, and I mean, how many shirts do you take on a month-long ride? You know, how much clothes you take? So I got like 4 shirts for a month. That ain't bad, is it? So Conan walks up and he goes, "Whose is this?" I said, "That's mine." He goes, "You get the shirt you're wearing. Scott, you get the shirt you're wearing, and you get one, you get a share." I'm like, really? Do we turn it inside out, or you know what we do? So that was I still got that shirt that I wore the entire trip. It'll come when I whistle for it. So Will took a pair of shoes for the animals. We took all these bags we sewed up, stuffed it with dry goods and other gear, packed the panniers, had a little feast the night before, and it's a little hard to see. Oh, so stop here. So we're saddled up, packed, and we're ready to ride, and over the hill comes riding Joe Hickey. We'd never seen him on a horse. He comes right up and goes, "I'm leaving with you guys." but I'm only going to ride today. So Joe rode with us and kind of led us out, got us off in the right direction, and had talked about many times he'd wanted to do this, but would always run out of water. And we're like, oh, great, you know. We kind of expected that. We knew we were going to ride through the Red Desert. So this is a video here.
That's a video?
Yeah. I don't know if there's any audio or not, but, you know, 2.5 years we're saddled up. There was a lot of adrenaline right here. It was finally happened. We were starting and thinking, I know all of us, we only got 2,000 miles to go. So off we go. Disappeared over the hill here. So, Lucky, I'm going to give this to you. I'll get us back on track here and start here.
Okay. I think everybody can hear me. Can you hear me? I don't need a microphone. Do I need a microphone? No.
Help.
Okay. It would help?
Yeah, you got a lot of old guys here.
Oh, okay.
He ain't with it.
Okay, so I think we spent a lot of time at the beginning about the preparation and getting ready to go because, you know, like Jack was saying, you know, when we first started talking about this trip, we didn't even know Ashley's modes of transportation, where he went, and everything. It all kind of came along as we developed the trip, and you just don't take off on 2,000 miles. And unlike, you know, not a lot, but some people are riding the Rendezvous, they have a chase vehicle. They have extra food and coolers, and they bring other gear. We had nothing. If it didn't go on a saddle or in the pack saddles, we didn't take it. So it was only what we had, and we just survived with what we had, with what we could carry. The disadvantage is Ashley could hunt and shoot along the way. We couldn't. We tried desperately to get permits from different states to shoot, even though it wasn't the season. They denied them, so we had to carry our own dried food. So before we keep going, and we're going to try to go through this quick because we'll have an hour, but we'll be down here by the keel boat and stuff talking. But we do have a Facebook page called Ashley's Return. You can scroll all the way to the bottom and follow the trip all the way up, even the building of the keel boat. The keel boat, too, I want to hit on. Not only did he build the keel boat, he built the keel boat on the road. So Bill leaves his house for months at a time and restores cabins and barns and things. So that boat went on that trailer everywhere he went, and he would work all day long for a customer, turn on spotlights and work on that keel boat until he was exhausted at midnight, and then he would go in, lay down with a light, and he would read about, you know, books like Keel Boats in the Missouri and study the building techniques and everything. So it was not just done in a year, but done on the road while he was still working. So great page. You can go follow our, last year we did every single day. We combined our 3 journals for the whole 95 days and put them on there. So go ahead and keep rolling. So the ride, and you can just kind of scroll through these pictures. They're kind of hard to see, but the ride was, I don't care how much training you do to get ready with your horse, how many miles you ride. I was up to like 30, 35 miles a day. And we averaged about 33 miles a day for a month. It was a 700-mile horse ride. By the end of like day 6 or 7, we all were bleeding, saddle sores. I mean, we're putting horse cream on our backsides and, you know, trying not to show the pain to each other, you know, and it took another 2.
Kidney stone the second day.
Oh yeah, he had a kidney stone the second day. He fought kidney stones for 3 months. But no matter how much you ride and train, you know, you can never replicate the Red Desert 90 to 95 degrees a day, you know, on the saddle day in and day out, you know, with leather pants on. And, you know, and it's just, part of Ashley's journals later on, he talks about the trip being really kind of nondescript scenery and all that. Well, it's true. I mean, this is nothing but over hill and sage. Okay, maybe the next hill would be something really cool. Sage. Okay, all right, there's a stream coming up to water the horses. It's dry. And we're just constantly boring. And I think one of the disadvantages we had, too, was Ashley could follow the rivers and stay in green grass and water, but that's all private fenced-off land now. So we had to skirt further east to get around the private land to go north. But this is, you can stop there. This is, hold on. So, you know, 95 days, maybe a couple of baths, and, you know, you get to a stream somewhere and the water's not freezing cold. Is that the video?
Yeah.
Turn the volume all the way up on the right.
This is the volume up.
Okay. And this is how you feel after you get a shower for the first time in several months. Go ahead and play. We dumped in Tarzan into that. But, so the ride, and this is a great picture. So we took raw meat, and raw meat will last about 14 days. Every day we set up a tripod over the fire. You put the meat on top and it slowly smokes, and you cook it. We would start off every day with oatmeal in the morning with some dried nuts and fruit. That was every day. And then at lunchtime you stop and we pass around a bag of dried fruit and nuts for lunch. And then at night, tequila. At night, you know, we cut up cabbage, eat raw cabbage, raw onion, raw garlic, raw ginger, and some cheese. That was our appetizer. And then we'd put on a stew or something with the meat, cook that, and then get a pot of coffee ready for the next morning. We had a big 3-gallon bucket of coffee we'd make, drink all that in the morning. And that was Wyoming, day after day. Some cool things along the way as we're flipping through. Came up to this little lake called Antelope Lake, and it was just a small, what we call back east of pond. We ride up and there's, of course, cattle watering. But there's about 60 antelope down there in the water, and then there's probably about 20 or 30 elk in the water. So we go riding past the lake, and they all scatter. We go over the hill, and you can just sit there, and there's like 6 or 7 herds of wild mustangs all around us. And you can see them, the bell mare and the stallion, just all moving in separate groups, probably 200, 250 wild mustangs. This is a great, oh, you can stop here. So this is Pacific Springs. So this particular location on the Mormon Trail, the Pony Express Trail, the California Trail, it's all one trail. It's where a lot of people stopped that were moving west, and the cabin that they stayed in is still there. Unfortunately, a lot of people died of cholera at this location and never made it west. But this is Pacific Springs, and this is like the best grass we have seen for days. And so we go riding out onto this grass, and our horses are eating while we're on the horses, and I looked over at Conan, who was my trail partner, and I said, hey, have you looked down yet? And he's looking at me and goes, no, why? And I said, look down. And as we look down, the sod is rolling. And there's a term for it out west at the beginning. Fen. And what happens is the water comes up underneath and lifts the sod. And so our horses were on that side, we're about halfway across. You know, we got to either go back and ride around and cross. And I don't know if you can see, this is me up here in the corner. You can see my horses breaking through that sod. There's a pack horse here stuck on the right. Yuma. Oh yeah, the mule. So I finally get out. This pack horse, it just about given up. It was over its head. We had to hold her head out of water. One guy, Conan, jumped down there, we took the packs off, and then after a while, Amish and I pulled her up on her side onto the sod, and she rested, and then she fell through it, and we were trying to get her up. And you'll see Dixon Garner here. This horse goes over, he's trying to pull her out. This horse goes down. But she's underneath that sod, is probably like 5 or 6 feet of water, and she couldn't touch the bottom. So eventually, we were able to get her on her side, she rests up, and finally she breaks loose. There's me and Amish trying to get her out of there, trying to get out of her way. And she finally comes out, but that could have been a disaster. About a week into it, nobody got hurt, none of the horses got hurt. I talked to a couple of guys here today that heard about the fens, and were like, tell me about that, it's kind of neat. And then just riding along the way, met a lot of great people. And you know, we had one guy that wasn't nice. For a quarter mile, we had, I don't know, like 48 hours without water, no grass for the horses, you know, all the water was just bad. And we wanted to get into town, we needed horseshoes, and we needed some grain for the horses. And we could see the village, a quarter mile right there. It's right there on a power line road. It's a public access road, and they would not let us ride that road to the village. After about a 35-mile day, we had to do another 4 or 5 miles around to get to the village. And so we stopped, and there's a lady cutting hay. She says, yeah, I came from my ranch. And then later on that night, we're talking about, you know, I grew up working on farms all my life. Like why do you guys say, that's a nice, sweet, free alfalfa. She goes, yep, that's all sold. I just cut bill they just cut, that's going to Joe Hickey tomorrow. You know, that's small of the world. River crossing were a lot of fun. They were talking about Jack's mule jumping. I don't know if you had that video, but she did not like water, and we had one incident where Jack got crossed on her just in the air. We got some video of that, and all this gear flying everywhere, and I swear the mule was smiling at him. But this was some of the early on water that we saw, and it just progressively got drier and drier and drier, and the grass was very, very poor, and again, dried out creeks. This is a professional photographer who came out. Great pictures, very painful. I'll get you right that again. Did you go across that again? Oh, I didn't quite get that. Did you do that again? My God, okay. But some great rides. Dixon Barton, the veterinarian, is actually, if you look him up, he is in the Veterinary Hall of Fame. He's like the top, like Jack was saying, equine stallion geneticist, certainly in the country, if not the world. So he travels the world doing equine genetics for stallions. This is one of the mules jumping a creek with Dixon. Just some really good. Conan's about to build a white man fire. But it's amazing, you know, look at these pictures. 700 miles on horseback, 30-some days. And that Fenton was the only real incident we had. Nobody got bucked, nobody got thrown, no horses ran off. I mean, a lot of nights the horses were just on hobbles. They were even picketed, and with wild Mustangs around, none of the horses ran off. We didn't have to chase any horses in the morning. No grizzlies or mountain lions came in the camp. Of course, it was hot and there was high ground. But, you know, so many things can go wrong with a horse because, you know, we all know that a butterfly can swallow a horse whole. You know, they'll just panic at anything. And nobody hit, not one incident with horses.
So easy to see if I can throw in, you know, how do you find your way through the desert, etc. This spring, you hear is what's called pilot view. It was used for many years for navigation. You know, they could keep it off to the right, left, whichever direction they were headed.
Yeah.
And
that's what we used. Sitting down eating meat, just cooking dinner, just very, very, very quiet. That's a backup one. I think that's just past Pacific Springs. That's an original cabin from who knows when, just sitting there. Keep rolling. Second. Oh, yeah. So, we're riding across some BLM land, that's checkerboard. We get to a gate, we gotta go through the gate to cross the guys. I know ranchers out there letting you cross. So this one neighbor, you know, he comes up over there and he's like, yeah, this is so-and-so. He said, no, let's ride the property. So we go through the gate. We don't want to get through the gate. Him and his wife pull up. They just been out shopping. The grocery store is just down the road about 3 or 4 hours. And he says, oh yeah, you can just, the best grass you can find is in my front lawn. He said, just follow my driveway down. And he said, I'll meet you down there. His driveway was 8 miles long. And so we camped there on the grass, and Amish and I got into a good horse race down that road. We were bored. He's like, you want to race? I'm like, sure. And so we took off for about a mile and a half, running the horses, and then he set us up in the grass, and he's like, yeah, I don't have to mow the grass. And we camped there for the night. And the next day, he told us how to get off of his property to get to the trail that we needed, and it was 13 more miles off his property to get to the BLM trail. But that was the best grass we had seen in probably a week, maybe 10 days. Horses were very, lost a lot of weight, a lot of shoes. Then you get into the, sorry, we start the fuel now? About the same time, you know, here's Bill building the keel boat on the road with his job. And this keel boat too, I do want to talk about a little bit. There are keel boats on the Missouri. Mitch is one of the, just, he's like the premier keel boat maker, and Bill consulted with him a lot on this one. This keel boat, because it wasn't being used for tourism and, you know, people on it, insurance and all that, Bill didn't have to follow any kind of modern techniques or use styrofoam or metal or anything. This is built to 1825 standards, which had books he gave to Bill and coached him on it. So it's built to 1825 standards, same building techniques and everything. And just like, you know, the cube boats of the time, this thing leaked from the top to the bottom, the sides. We spent a lot of time. I still have tar on my shirt from crawling under patching holes with boards and stuff at night. So just a little family. We stopped at one camp, actually on the, what was the name of the ranch back in the day? The Hayes Ranch. So we stopped on the Hayes Ranch. If you're not familiar, the Hayes Ranch is the ranch where Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid used to get fresh horses. And so we found the family there, and they let us put our horses on their land and graze. And then they said, "Our kids riding with you tomorrow." I'm really, yeah, sure. So we think Dad's going to show up with the kids and horses. If he does, and he lets out, what was Corbin, 8? 5. Sister was 7. He drops off a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old with their horses, and he says, "I'll meet you at the house," and leaves. And these two got on horses and rode just as good as any adult I've ever seen. Yeah.
So there's Corbin. His horse and his sister's horse was bigger than ours, I think. That was kind of nervous when they showed up because we was live for him at that point, but it all worked out. But the night that his family come down and met us for supper by the fire, me and Corbin started talking, and I introduced myself to him, and back and forth, and the kids had really good manners. They were raised right, and he kept asking me questions, and he'd forget my name. He'd be like, "Now, what's your name again?" I'd say, "Amish." He's like, "Oh, okay, Amish." And I ended up giving him a bead that I had on my hat, and I had a shoelace, leather shoelace, and I gave it to him. And he's like, "What's this for?" I said, "Well, this means that you and I are friends." And I said, "Anytime you have that bead," I said, "you'll think of Amish and our talks." And he's like, "Okay." And so then the next morning they show up, and we ride to their house, and they feed us, and we got done eating, and his dad said, "Hey, Corbin, do you have something you want to share with the Amish?" He's like, "Yeah." And he takes off, and he's going for a few minutes, and he comes back, and he said, "Amish," he said, "I got something for you." And the night before, I told him that I wanted to catch a rattlesnake, and I wanted to take the rattlesnake tail home. And he ends up giving me a rattlesnake tail, and he said, "I want you to have this." And his dad said, "Corbin, why don't you give him the bigger one?" And he's like, "No, he just gave me a little bead." So I got a little rattlesnake tail. I know there was a bigger one there I wanted, but he gave me the little one. And I talk to his mother every now and then on that other world that everybody lives in, and he asks about us all the time. So me and him have a connection, you know, and I think of Corbin a lot, and I'd like to go out and see him again, but we haven't. What you got?
I just want to add a little thing. Corbin's sitting on his horse, and we're trying to scramble up to get going, and he kind of rides up to it, and he goes, "Come on, men, we're burning daylight."
Yeah. Kid looked like a roofing nail with that hat on. Okay. And you know, all along the way, it was just refreshing. And we're not going to get through all this today. We only got like 5 more minutes. We can kind of pick up where we are tomorrow and then Sunday. But the one thing that really just stuck to the three of us is just the total goodness of the people along the way. I mean, and we can give you just dozens of examples. It was no different than, you know, the mountain at a time with the tribes and the Indians helping them out and giving them food, and, you know, all the way back to the Pilgrims. And people on this trip, they found out about us, and they were waiting for us. And we were given, you know, corn on the cob, elk meat, buffalo meat. I mean, you know, we could have left with no food, and we would have eaten all along the way very well. People were just so good and so generous. And, you know, when we get into the river part tomorrow, we'll hit on that. There's diversion dams, which they didn't have to deal with. And, you know, here we are with 2 pirogues and a full boat and all of our gear and everything. And we got to figure out how to get 7 miles from takeout to put back in. Amish and I would walk up to the door, dum, 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 tell the story. We'd be like, "Yeah, let me hook up the trailer, I'll help you boys out," and then just, you know, help us out. And we didn't. You can't plan that. We just said we're just going to go and we'll figure it out. And if we got to drag one of the boats 5 miles, we'll drag it 5 miles. But we didn't have to, because people just all along the way were to take care of us all the way, you know, to Missouri. You know, we had no idea about, you know, Ashley's grave and his final resting place. Right here, this guy and a couple others took us to Ashley's grave. You know, we didn't plan that. You know, so just the abject goodness of people was amazing. I'm just telling you, I love it. Probably about 8 or so. Okay. Where's Bob?
I'm right here.
How much time we got?
What's that?
How much time we got?
Oh, you got about 10 more minutes till it's over.
Okay.
So you can go.
All right, well, let's keep cycling through the horse ride. So day in, day out, there's the meat, raw meat, carrying the meat, and you know, at one point we're riding through. You get further north into Wyoming. You get away from grazing, and you get into more cropland, and it's fenced off, and they don't want you to ride in the crops. So you get a lot of roads and public access along canals and things. And at one point we end up in Grable, Wyoming, and you know, just nasty, disgusting, smelly, riding down through Grable. And we got 6 horses that need shoes. And it's probably 100 degrees that day. You're looking around, there's no trees, there's no shade. And we're like literally right down Main Street. And we look to the right and there's a bar, and there's an overhang where they have music. And we're like, let's ask. And so we went back and said, can we shoe our horses in the shade of your overhang? And she called the owner, and he's like, yeah, sure. So we, you know, so there we are, you know, shoeing the horses, you know, in the shade of this bar. And on the way out, somebody had a smart idea of, hey, let's see if we can ride through the bar. Was that you? And so we asked them, and they're like, yeah, we'll let you ride. So we literally rode in the bar, rode through the bar, said goodbye to everybody, and rode out the other door of the bar, back out on Main Street, and kept going. Another stop, another nice family saw us, and he backed up and gave us some apples and water and said, come to my place, I've got grass, I've got a place where you can put your horses. Here's Grable, Wyoming. About 6 hours. And the bar we rode through, I think, was that going to play? Oh yeah, this is great. Once again, anything could have gone wrong. Those guys to the right playing pool, people having dinner, a guy here at the bar having French fries. Here comes 4 wild men riding through on horses.
Then she gave us a helmet at the end of the bar as we ride out.
Yeah. Yep. Everybody grabbed a nice cold beer and rode out. It's just stuff you never think is going to happen when you're riding. A lot of roads, finally some good water. Dixon Barner, sick as a dog, under a bridge trying to survive, trying to get through the day. He got sick, I got sick.
Rode horseback asleep.
Rode horseback asleep.
Go down the road like this.
Yep. So this is the final, so this is interesting. For some of you guys know Scott Sibley, the horn maker. Scott and Kathy Sibley. So at the finish point, right there where we're on our horses, Scott and Kathy Sibley laid out a smorgasbord like you can't believe. They brought down their grills and everything, and he laid out food for days.
So right after we crossed the Big Horn River, my vehicle stopped, just act like they were going to take pictures, but she asked if she could. We stopped and talked to her. She actually had been out looking for us, her and her daughter. They were trying to find us because they heard about our journey. And they ended up having snacks and treats for us. And then Colin, another gentleman, went and looked for a place for us to camp later. And ended up bringing us back some cold beverages, which was nice. And wherever Pat and Elma's at right now, in Billings, I think we're going to get them. I guess there's a bunch of people there with cops waiting on us. Most of the cops are there for just to see us, not all sent for trespassing since we only had.
So this was the very last day of the ride before we got here, and the last night of the camp was, absolutely miserable. It just, we're coming up on a lake and we're in some low bog area. We're trying to find a place to picket the horses out, get some grass. And as we stopped on the road, literally the horses' ears and heads were covered with mosquitoes. We were getting chewed up with mosquitoes. And we finally had to ride a few more miles and got up on some high ground. And the horses still ended up down in the boggy grass. And mosquitoes were so bad, the next morning I went down and released the picket hobbles on my horse, and she just went up the hill and stood there and waited for me to get the breeze away from the mosquitoes. It was pretty treacherous. So we had to end about 20 miles short of what Ashley did. The Crow Reservation wouldn't allow us to ride on their land. They said, you come on our land, we're going to confiscate your horses, you're here, you're going to jail, and we'll give you a lawyer, you can sort out what you're going to keep and not keep. So we decided it kind of really wasn't worth that hassle. So we ended up stopping just short of Kathy and Scott Sibley across the smorgasbord. And this is where we did what Ashley did. Our angels came and met us with the truck and the trailer, took our horses back, just like his went back. Then we got transportation over to Fort Smith, and we started over to Bone Belt and go on to the next segment. That's about as far as we can get today. I think we probably got a couple of minutes for any questions. Anything? It was, but I'll ask the question. People will say to us, you know, why did you do this? And the three of us just kind of looked at each other, you know, and how do we even answer that? Really, the answer is why not? You know, the timing was right for all of us, and you know, people always say when you're old, you're in a rocking chair, you're gumming your food, and, you know, messing your drawers, you want to be able to look back and say, and have memories and not have regrets. And we just wanted to do this, and, you know, the other thing is the trappers we emulated are, you know, they're in their teens and 20s doing this. You know, we were in our 40s, 50s, and 60s, and we're like, can we do this? Can we do 2,000 miles, make 3 modes of transportation, and just prove ourselves we can do it? We're like, why not? Retired, own business, let's just go and do it. And, you know, just, I had no idea what I said. I'm in when I said I'm in, but we figured it out. Amish didn't have any idea, Jack didn't, so, but the answer is why not?
Yeah.
Why not? We'll, tomorrow I guess we'll pick up with the river portion and then the heel boat portion on Sunday. Yes? 1 o'clock. 1 o'clock Saturday, 1 o'clock Sunday, and then we'll be down by the keel boat in that area by that camper right there too if you want to go down, pick up rain and ask questions. We can tell some more things that happen along the way. All right?
Thank you.